The Berezovskaya complex in the middle of Moscow's capital caught fire. Ukraine's intelligence general confirmed that Kyiv can completely launch drones to Moscow. Ukrainian drones can reach Moscow and beyond. Major General Kyrylo Budanov, head of the General Intelligence Directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, said this in an interview given to Radio NV following reports of a fierce fire at the multifunctional complex on the Berezovskaya embankment in the Dorogomilovo district, central Moscow. "We have drones that can be launched to Moscow and beyond," he said. However, he declined to provide details about Ukraine's drone deployments. Regarding the massive fire at the multifunctional complex on the Berezovskaya embankment, General Budanov noted that safety rules are violated too often in Russia. "It's unusual, it shouldn't have happened," he said, dismissing the possibility that the fire complex was caused by sabotage activities by Ukrainian troops. "We do not attack civilian infrastructure." Commenting on the military situation, General Budanov said that Russia had switched to a defensive position, except for two areas. On March 31, 2023, another Russian offensive attempt, the so-called Winter-Spring Offensive, failed. They were reported to want to go to the administrative border of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Again, this isn't even the fifth attempt to fail. Currently, Russia does not have the capacity to conduct a strategic offensive operation. And it won't happen in the near future. According to General Budanov, Russia has turned to strategic defense to hold the occupied territories and prevent Ukraine's operation to liberate these areas. There are two exceptions. The first was the attempt to capture Bakhmut. I must also frankly say that they have almost taken Bakhmut, according to their statement, since June 2022. It will soon be exactly 1 calendar year. The situation there was complicated, but Bakhmut stood his ground. The second was an attempt to capture half of Avdiivka from the north, where the main Mariinka front was located. As reported by Ukrinform, Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Maliar said on April 17 that the enemy has concentrated all of his professional strike forces on 4 areas to the east, Marinka, Lyman, Bakhmut and Avdiivka, so Ukraine should focus more of its military potential on it to deter the enemy. In an earlier interview with US ABC News, General Budanov lamented that the leak of classified Pentagon documents was bringing too much benefit to Russia, prolonging the war and causing many deaths. Unjust. Popular descriptions so far still refer to Jack Teixeira as a celebrity who likes to be popular among his friends when he publishes classified documents on social networks. However, investigations by the U.S. Department of Defense increasingly show that Jack Teixeira acts as a professional spy. Even his attitude before the court was very professional. He showed an unshakable composure, a calm that is usually only seen in people who have been in court hundreds of times, not people who have just gone to court for the first time. 2. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov said Russia was interested in ending the Ukraine conflict as soon as possible. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Monday during a press conference with Brazilian Foreign Minister Mauro Vieira in Brasilia that Russia was interested in ending the conflict in Ukraine as soon as possible. Lavrov also thanked his Brazilian colleagues for their excellent understanding of the situation in Ukraine and said Russia was grateful for Brazil's desire to contribute in finding possible solutions. The Russian foreign minister is also expected to meet with Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva on Tuesday, according to the schedule of the Brazilian Foreign Ministry published online. Ukraine has repeatedly said that peace in the conflict will only be achieved if Russia restores its borders and Kyiv takes back Crimea. True peace means restoring Ukraine's internationally recognized borders. True peace means a safe homeland for Ukrainians living in Crimea, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said in a speech last week at the Black Sea Security Conference in Bucharest. I reiterate Brazil's position in contributing to a peaceful resolution of the conflict, recalling President Lula's statements in seeking the creation of a friendly group of nations to mediate. For negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, Vieira told a televised news conference. Vieira also stressed Brazil's stance against unilateral sanctions. Such measures, in addition to being approved by the United Nations Security Council, have a negative impact on economies around the world, especially in less developed countries, most of which still have not fully recovered from the pandemic, said Vieira. 3. Leaked U.S. documents reveal both Ukraine and Russia have problems for the next phase of the war. There are some interesting takeaways from leaked U.S. documents about the progress of the conflict in Ukraine. Russia's ground forces in the country are dwindling and there are few reinforcements. Ukraine's air defenses are exhausted, making any counterattack vulnerable to Russian air superiority. And the United States does not expect the war to end this year. The 53 documents reviewed by CNN provide an overview of the capabilities and vulnerabilities identified by the U.S. Department of Defense during the first quarter of this year. Circumstances change, resources and intentions change. But the documents tend to confirm that Ukrainian forces are preparing for an attack and that Russia is doing its best to keep what they already have, while also seeking to use aviation to deter any Ukrainian attack. And if the Russians don't know how the Ukrainian military will design a counteroffensive, the documents could give them some useful clues. Several documents, mostly between February and March, tend to confirm that Russia sent the majority of its battalions into the war in Ukraine. Despite last fall's mobilization, which could potentially add 300,000 troops to Russia's ranks, a significant number of these battalions have been described as combating ineffective, short of troops. Numbers and equipment. One document states that 527 of Russia's 544 existing battalions took part in the invasion and 474 battalions were inside Ukraine. A significant number are deployed in the south of the country, with an estimated 23,000 troops in Zaporizhia and another 15,000 in Kherson. That shows the Russians think the Ukrainian attack will be aimed at that area. But in Donetsk in eastern Ukraine, for example, 19 of the 91 battalions were assessed as no longer capable of effective combat. Russia still has a huge arsenal of weapons, but documents show that the best has been lost, and older, less reliable tanks and armored vehicles are being thrown onto the battlefield. One said that Russia continues to lag behind its set targets in terms of equipment and personnel, and is resorting to older, less accurate munition systems. While Ukraine's ground forces may be in better shape than the enemy, especially since the 12 new brigades mentioned in a leak are fully trained and equipped, reliance on Soviet-era air defense systems show a growing vulnerability. This in turn could give the Russian Air Force a certain amount of freedom in the skies to thwart any Ukrainian ground attack. One of the leaked documents details how Ukraine's stockpile of Soviet-era medium-range air defense missiles has been severely depleted. Worryingly, it has been suggested that since February, Ukraine has run out of ammunition for the highly capable German-made Iris-T air defense system. Ukrainian officials have repeatedly asked their Western partners for more air defense weapons, and one document says Ukraine needs a period of 3 to 6 months to attract more Western contributions. In an interview with American television channel ABC News, Major General Kirilo Budanov, head of Ukraine's military intelligence service, lamented that the leak was bringing too much benefit to Russia, prolonging the war, and cause many people to die unjustly. Popular descriptions so far still refer to Jack Teixeira as a celebrity who likes to be popular among his friends when he publishes classified documents on social networks. However, investigations by the U.S. Department of Defense increasingly show that Jack Teixeira acts as a professional spy. Even his attitude before the court was very professional. He showed an unshakable composure, a calm that is usually only seen in people who have been to court hundreds of times, not the first time. Fourth, Ukraine accuses Moscow of threatening the grain initiative when Russia says the prospect of an extension is bleak. Ukraine has accused Moscow of threatening the UN-brokered grain initiative, saying the inspection of ships in Turkish territorial waters that were intercepted for the second time. Ukraine's Ministry of Infrastructure said in a statement that the inspections were blocked on Monday. As a result, for the second time in the 9-month operation of the grain initiative, the inspection plan was not drawn up and not a single vessel was inspected. This threatens the operation of the grain initiative. Since April 2023, Russian representatives at the Joint Coordination Center, or JCC for short, have been trying to interfere in the operation of Ukrainian ports and exporters by imposing their own criteria. Them to identify specific ships which are participating in the initiative. The JCC facilitates the operation of the grain initiative and includes representatives from Ukraine, Russia, Turkey and the United Nations. Ukraine categorically rejects the latest Russian demands and opposes its interference in the operation of Ukrainian ports. We hope that the partners of the United Nations and Turkey can still ensure that the JCC is in compliance with the procedures that have been operating for the past 9 months. For its part, Russia maintains its position and says that the prospect of extending the grain deal is very bleak. The outlook is still not very bright, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said when asked about the possibility of an extension of the current deal. 5. The UK is investigating whether to sanction everyone involved in the Kara-Murza trial, the minister said. Secretary of State for Development and Africa Affairs Andrew Mitchell said British officials is investigating the possibility of sanctioning all involved in the trial of British-Russian critics of the Kremlin Vladimir Kara-Murza. Kara-Murza was sentenced to 25 years in prison after publicly criticizing the Ukraine war. Mitchell called the trial a farce. He commented that British citizens are no longer safe to stay in Russia. This trial, being conducted behind closed doors, with no diplomats or observers allowed in, we didn't have the right time to prepare. Mr. Russian envoys were summoned and expected the UK to look specifically at the issue of health care and the availability of medicines. On the matter of punishment, we sanctioned the judge and the prison officer on Magnitsky's recommendation because they were involved in that case, the minister said. And I have instructed the investigating officials to potentially sanction everyone involved in this trial. And we hope, within the next week, to come up with a package of further measures on this. 6. Photos showed destroyed Russian tanks near Vuhledar. Newsweek had a report titled "A Photo Shows Destroyed Russian Tanks Near Vuhledar, Working Well," which means, picture shows Russian tanks destroyed near Vuhledar, well done. Ukrainian army shared video footage of what appears to be Russian military vehicles being destroyed outside the disputed town of Vuhledar. Ukrainian Brigadier General Alexander Tarnovsky, head of the Tavria Tactical and Tactical Group, posted an image on Telegram of abandoned and damaged vehicles near the settlement of Donetsk, which has seen heavy fighting. The image then went viral on social media. These vehicles are described by Ukrainian media as tanks, but appear to be a combination of tanks and armored personnel carriers. Tarnovsky said in his Telegram post that Ukrainian forces are holding positions around Vuhledar and preventing Russian forces from advancing towards the besieged city of Avdiivka. Our artillery is working well, every soldier in the trenches today is performing at the highest level, the commander said. Newsweek has reached out to the Russian Defense Ministry for comment via email. The Ukrainian mining town of Vuhledar saw fierce clashes earlier this year, with Russian forces failing to capture the settlement after a 3-week offensive. The New York Times reported that the Russian military lost at least 130 tanks and armored personnel carriers in the attack. Former U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis told Newsweek that the losses highlighted tactical mistakes. It shows that the Russians cannot effectively attack Ukraine, that they are on a tactical level, Mark Kanchan, senior advisor to the Center for Strategic Studies and International Security Programs, told Newsweek. They are still not well coordinated. The Washington-based Institute for the Study of War, ASW, said on Saturday that Russian bloggers reported on limited infantry attacks near Vuhledar over the weekend. However, the Ukrainian General Staff did not list Vuhledar as a flashpoint in its operations update on Sunday. Russian forces did not conduct offensive operations around Vuhledar, although the settlement was fired by shells, the General Staff of Ukraine said. Russian state media reported on April 14 that Moscow's reconnaissance teams had captured a Ukrainian stronghold near Vuhledar, killing 12 Ukrainian soldiers. In early April, it was reported that the Russian Defense Ministry had dismissed Senior Lieutenant General Rustem Muradov as commander of Russia's eastern forces in Ukraine after repeated, poorly planned attacks failed in an attempt to capture Vuhledar. The British Ministry of Defense said on April 6. Russia's 155th Marine Brigade, considered an elite brigade, suffered heavy losses in Vuhledar. The ISW said the brigade had been reconstituted 8 times since the start of the all-out war, largely due to losses in the persistent attempt to attack Vuhledar. According to Western analysts such as ISW, Russian forces have carried out human sea-style frontal attacks in and around Vuhledar, resulting in high casualties. 7. Putin and China boast of military cooperation amid tensions with the West. Newsweek reported Putin and China tout their military cooperation amid tensions with West, military cooperation compartment amid tensions with the West. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese Defense Minister Li Thuong-Phuc praised the military cooperation between the two countries in the past. Tensions with the West over the ongoing Russian-Ukrainian war. During his meeting with Li Shangfu in Moscow on Sunday, Putin praised his country's defense cooperation with China and said that joint military exercises, including military exercises Army, Navy and Air Force, were held in Europe and the Far East, Reuters reported. Shangfu's visit comes a month after Chinese President Xi Jinping met the Russian leader in Moscow in an effort to assert an unlimited partnership as they deepen economic cooperation, politics, and defense. I think that is another important area that strengthens the strategic, trust-based character of our relations, the relationship between Russia and China, Putin said of international cooperation. Their room on Sunday, according to Russian news agency TASS. He also added that the Chinese defense minister has a rather rich program of work in Russia. We are actively working through our military divisions, regularly exchanging useful information, working together in the field of military technical cooperation and holding joint exercises. Putin said as above, according to Reuters. According to TASS, Li will meet with Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu from Sunday to Tuesday to discuss the current status and prospects of developing bilateral cooperation in the defense field, as well as current issues on global and regional security. Meanwhile, the United States has been keeping an eye on recent cooperation between China and Russia, warning Beijing not to provide weapons or military aid to Russian troops in war-torn Ukraine. In February, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the United States had information that China was strongly considering the supply of lethal weapons to Russia. To the best of our knowledge, they haven't crossed that line yet, he told Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press. In addition, CIA Director William Burns said on CBS News Face the Nation in February that the United States believes that the Chinese leadership is looking at providing lethal equipment. Those statements angered Chinese officials, with Wang Wenbin, a spokesman for China's foreign ministry, saying in the same month that it is the United States, not China, that is constantly sending weapons air to the battlefield. Wang Wenbin also accused the U.S. of blaming and spreading misinformation. The U.S. has no right to give orders to China, and we have never accepted the U.S. pointing the finger at China-Russia relations, let alone exerting pressure or coercion, Wang added. Who is calling for peace talks? And who is sparking and encouraging confrontation? The international community can see it for themselves. From the very beginning of the war in Ukraine, which began last February, China has taken the position that it will not arm Moscow as it tries to avoid getting involved in the conflict, and has repeatedly been warned by the U.S. not to change that position. Western nations, including NATO members, have been providing Ukraine with advanced military equipment, tanks and artillery as well as humanitarian aid to help the Eastern European country defeat the army. Russia's war raged across major Ukrainian cities, including Kyiv, Odessa, Kherson, and most recently intensified in Bakhmut, located in the Donetsk region. Newsweek reached out via email to the Russian and Chinese foreign ministries. 8. Ukraine's top-secret commando unit confronts Russian military power. Olivia Burke of The Sun based in London has a report titled Special OPS Inside the Top-Secret Ukrainian Commando Unit Taking on Russia's Military Might, which means Special Activities Inside the Dark Commando Unit. Ukraine's secret forces confront the military might of Russia. While Ukraine was busy working out the details of the planned spring offensive, the world was given a rare glimpse of a top-secret commando unit crushing its military might. Russia. The elite border force, known as the Dozer Unit, is made up of the country's best people specializing in covert missions. Top Ukrainian military officials have formed this formidable army by recruiting the best men from the armed forces of the state border guard. And some superhuman civilians who passed grueling tests and challenged their physical strength and skill, were also admitted. The Dozer Unit, officially named the 10th Mobile Border Detachment, patrols the vast Ukrainian border while carrying out covert operations. The safety of President Zelensky is said to be their top responsibility as he makes tours out of Kyiv amid concerns the Kremlin has targeted him. The Daily Mail reported that this team was assigned important tasks by the State Border Service, which often requires a drastic and quick armed response. Tough armies have been instrumental in stopping Russia's advance, but have scorned public glory in the national interest. But shocking footage of the top-secret team has now surfaced online, giving a glimpse of their efforts to sabotage Vladimir Putin's invasion. Unit Dozer, established in 2002, makes up a small part of Ukraine's nearly 53,000-strong border force, with 45,000 military personnel. The unit rarely checked travel documents, as they were preoccupied with fighting the Russian invaders. A dramatic video showing off their capabilities on land, sea, and air has now been shared online to mark the 22nd anniversary of the unit's founding on April 5. Recording their incredible skill and fearsome arsenal, Dozer Special Forces have proven why they are so highly regarded. Video captured some of their extraordinary feats on military vehicles as well as on foot, and on the front lines. Soldiers are understood to be trained to fight on a variety of terrains, including underwater, as well as in complete darkness. The clip shows the commando unit conducting training exercises with night vision goggles, laser sights, helicopters, and boats. One of the team members was seen smashing a car window, while another spectacularly fired his rifle underwater. The Dozer Army is rumored to have been backed by the United States and even trained before Russia launched a full-scale invasion. According to the risk intelligence firm Sibylline, they are said to have received a lot of funding for tactical equipment as well as maritime patrol boats. The company claims that Ukraine's combat forces have played a key role in stopping people smuggling across the border, after human trafficking has exploded since the war began. As such, they can play an important role in preventing organized crime groups from smuggling military-aged men out of Ukraine to evade military service. Given the attributive nature of the fighting in the east and the growing need for manpower, these operations are likely to remain of increasing importance as evading military service remains an issue. Castle. The Dozer unit last launched recruitment in 2018 to strengthen Ukraine's defenses, especially along the eastern border with Russia. Details of their operations are a state secret, but several clips released online show the unit taking part in the bloody battle for Bakhmut. The elite special forces are said to have held out for weeks in the ruined city before being forced to retreat. It is assumed that Ukraine will rely on the Dozer army to strengthen its defense when the brutal war unfolds. They seem to have fought better on the battlefield than Putin's Spetsnaz forces, who have suffered a staggering 95% casualty rate. Putin's senseless soldiers are known for their ruthlessness, but have been considerably taken down by the embarrassing leak. The soldiers, who underwent about 4 years of arduous training, are said to have suffered significant losses after being forced to assist Wagner troops. It marks a heavy blow to Moscow, as U.S. officials say Russia could take up to a decade to replenish its dwindling task force.